Well, hi, Kip. Thank you so much for joining us on the Next Online podcast. We're very excited to have you on as our next guest. Now, before we get into all things marketing and the topics that we're going to discuss today, I want you to walk us to the beginning of your journey. How did you get started in the industry, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm from Louisiana, and for the longest time when I was growing up, thought I was going to be a lawyer. And so the way I got started in marketing was I had joined the student union and became head of the speakers committee.
Okay.
And I had a meeting one day, and normally these meetings didn't have anybody show up, but this particular one, I show up and it's packed. There are like 20 people in the room. So I'm like, what is going on here? And they said, well, we want you to bring Gene Roddenberry to LSU. And it's like, well, who the heck is Gene Roddenberry? Oh, that's the creator of Star Trek. And I mean, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan or not. I was not at the time, but by the end of the meeting, they had convinced me that this would be a big idea. And instead of having it in the local, theater that we normally have speakers of 2,000 people, they wanted to have it in the assembly center where we play basketball games. It could hold 14,000 people. So I went to my boss and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. And she said, you're out of your mind. And I said, I know we can do this. And she said, great, because if it fails, you're fired. So it was an all or nothing thing. And so I didn't have any money to promote it. So I went down to the local TV station, convinced them to be the official sponsor of the Gene Roddenberry talk. And long story short, it was a huge hit. We filled the thing up. He announced the first Star Trek movie. And I had a religious conversion that night and decided that forget the law, I'm going to be in marketing.
Nice.
And from there, I went on to get a graduate fellowship in marketing research. Got my MBA at the University of Cincinnati. Conveniently, Procter & Gamble was in the neighborhood. So to the best of my knowledge, I'm the first one that walked in off the street and talked my way into brand management at P&G, which was maybe the biggest break I've had in my career. Spent 10 years at Procter, wanted to work international. Procter at the time didn't believe Americans could do very well outside the U.S. So PepsiCo did. So I ended up going over to PepsiCo, worked there for 12 years, worked in about 65 different countries. So I got my wish, worked with KFC in a variety of positions, including head of KFC International Marketing. Also, I was a general manager for a number of markets. Then I got promoted to CMO out here in California for Taco Bell, which was a dream job. But be careful for what you wish for, because at the time we had the Chihuahua.
Yep.
And the Chihuahua is what I call a video vampire. Everybody loved the Chihuahua, but they didn't buy any more tacos because of that. So after about 2 years, after a fantastic career at PepsiCo, I was let go because the numbers were down.
Yeah.
And that was fairly devastating. I was actually out of work for about 18 months.
Wow.
Got miscongeniality a number of times in terms of a lot of the jobs that I applied for. But I'm a fairly lucky guy. So I had a boss at PepsiCo named Bill Cobb, and he went to go work for this little startup at the time called eBay and said, hey, would you like to come join me there? And I did. So I spent 6 years at eBay in Silicon Valley with Meg Flipman and the rest of the gang. Pretty much had to reinvent myself as a marketer. And then financially, that turned out to be a pretty good bet. And from there, made enough money that I took about 4 years off to do my own consulting gig. But then my boss at eBay and PepsiCo, Bill, called me up and said, I need you to help me out at H&R Block. So I ended up as president of the H&R Block retail business.
Wow.
With about 80,000 tax pros. Who would have guessed?
Crazy. Yeah.
The craziest career of all time.
For sure.
Wrapped that up in 2018. And then to kind of cap off my corporate career, came back to Silicon Valley and was what I call an operating partner at a VC fund called Tom Vez Ventures, about $750 million fund based in the Bay Area. and wrapped that up last year. And right now I'm pretty much focused on advising a couple of startups. And also I've got my coaching business. So that in a nutshell, Karina, is one of the wilder careers you probably have heard about.
For sure. And what an incredible journey. I mean, you've really experienced it all. And I think that, you know, that's actually very inspiring to hear, especially for our audience, that next gen hearing such a, a well thought out, even the career journey that you've had and all the different, steps that you took to get to where you're at today. So I kind of want to fast forward to today, right? You've talked about how you've held global roles, you've served on some boards, and now you coach senior marketing leaders in your coaching business as well. So when you look at your own evolution, what do you think helped you grow the most? And what do you think rising leaders, often overlook in their own development?
Well, I'll give you a couple of thoughts. First of all, um, anybody that claims they plan out their career, at least marketing, is lying because,
Yeah.
uh, I guess if you were a CFO or maybe head of legal or HR, you could maybe predict your career path. But I think both the crazy thing and the exciting thing about marketing is the environment changes dramatically. I mean, when I think about what I did at Procter and Gamble back in the '80s and what a CMO would be doing today, it's like, could it be any different? I mean, you've got some fundamental principles that are the same, but the technology has radically changed. The environment's changed. The selling environment has changed. So the first thing I would tell anybody is you've got to be flexible. You've got to be very confident of your skill set in terms of what makes you unique. What do you bring to the party that's going to be valued by the marketplace? And yet, at the other hand, if the environment change, you change with it. Like right now, I'm learning how to code apps. I never in a million years thought I would do that.
Yeah.
I took one course when I was in college called Introduction to Fortran. That's like studying ancient Greek now. And yet, with this platform called Replit, I've
Yeah.
already created about 5 apps, and it's fun. And so, in addition to being flexible and open minded, I think you've got to just be insatiably curious. Like, and the way I think about a portfolio career is every year you should be picking up a new skill, a new experience, such that when you have an opportunity, for a new role or a new company or new category, and I've worked in about 8 different categories, you can kind
Yeah.
of pull out of your toolkit any number of these experiences. And the other big advantage I've had, frankly, in my career is since I haven't spent forever in one career, I would go into these new opportunities with a set of fresh eyes and go, well, wait a minute. Why do you do it that way? Well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, have you ever thought about doing it this way? And for a lot of people, it's like, wow, that's incredibly insightful. It's like, well, no, not really. I'm just applying what I did in this other category to your category, and well, let's give it a go. So that would be my advice to anybody. God only knows over the next 10 or 20 or 30 years what marketing is going to look like. I don't think any of us
Yeah.
could predict that with any confidence. But if you go in there with the right mindset, with the right hunger for curiosity, and the right willingness to frankly bust your butt and do what it takes to get to the next level, I think the odds are in your favor.
Absolutely. And I think doubling down on that, like I'm a big believer in continuously learning. I love the school route, of course. I did all that, but continuously learning even in the workplace, on the job, getting your hands in there, I think is the best way to learn. And as you're saying, marketing is evolving. We can't even predict, with the whole new technologies coming about, like how it's going to be. I think it's very important to really keep up with the learning aspect of the job.
Yeah, one thing I've done in every position I've ever had is I didn't stick to the role description.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of these jobs, I would write my own role description because, God bless the people in HR, but they have a certain limited ability to actually know what that function needs to do.
Yeah.
I was always willing to volunteer to go do things that had not been done before. For example, one time at Procter and Gamble, I had my boss come up to me and say, "I need you to go sell a TV series onto a network." And it's like, really? I have no idea how to do that. He goes, "You'll figure it out." And I
Yeah.
did. I went in and sold this guy named Bert Wolf, and we sold to the Lifetime Network, one of the first shows that combined cooking, history, and travel. And it was quite successful and led to a series of other shows that Bert did on PBS. But again, just because nobody's ever done it, don't take that as an excuse. Take that as an opportunity, because if you consider yourself a brand, and I do, and everybody should, how are you going to distinguish your brand? How are you going to differentiate your brand? And if your brand is one in which people go, well, he's creative, he's persistent, and he gets results, then that is going to help me stand out from some of the other candidates that might be going after the same role. So, what
Exactly.
is your brand? What is your superpower? What are you doing to really leverage that in marketplace? And then how do you get the word out there about it? Not in a braggadocious kind of way, but in a way in which people can know that you've done some really good stuff.
That is the most important piece for sure, especially in the journeys today and how everything is constantly evolving. Now, I want to talk about how you went from P&G to PepsiCo and now coaching the next generation of leaders or even CMOs and as CMO coaches. You've always emphasized the importance of having a development plan. Now, what do most rising leaders overlook when trying to map out, would you say, their next 5 years?
There are a couple of key principles to keep in mind when you're thinking about your career. And I'll play off your next in line title. So if you want to be the next in line for, let's say, the head of marketing in a company, um, there's a concept or a term called circle of influence, and you're probably familiar with this one. But the circle of influences are basically the folks that can either make or break you in terms of getting promoted.
Yeah.
Uh, it shouldn't be a mystery as to who these people are. It's definitely your boss. It's probably your boss's boss. It's probably the head of HR. It might even be, some of the other functions, or maybe even some of your peers. And so, even though I hate to use politicians as a bit of a comparison, you've got to keep in touch with your you know, compatriots and make sure that if they had to vote today for Karina to get the CMO job, how would they vote? And if it was not a thumbs up, then you've got to diplomatically and thoughtfully figure out, okay, what is holding them back? What do I still need to do?
Yeah.
And that leads to, a development plan. A development plan is something that doesn't have to be complicated at all, but it's something that you should develop. You should actively use on a regular basis with your boss. And it's an agreement, not just to what you're going to do, but frankly, what they're going to do to help you accomplish whatever it is that you still need to do. So, for example, and I'll continue to use you as an example. Let's say that you know a little bit about AI, but you're not really sure how you're going to utilize it for marketing. So we're
Yeah.
going to set up a special project for Karina to go in there and analyze what are the top 3 opportunities for AI to improve the marketing output for the company. You're going to come back, you're going to lay out the plan, you're going to get the funding, you're going to get the team, we're going to have the metrics, we're going to meet on a regular basis. And the results of that will be part of your proof that, okay, you told me what I needed to do, I went and did it, and now I'm ready to move on to the next thing. To
Yeah.
go in there with a bit of an entitlement, like, hey, I've been here for this number of years, I deserve to be promoted right now. Newsflash, they could not care less how long you've been here. They care about what you've done for me. The same thing goes for educational credentials. I mean, hey, if I came in and said I had a Stanford or Harvard MBA, but I didn't get anything done, well, who cares? What have you done for me
Yeah.
lately? You've got to be able to demonstrate value. In fact, one of the things that I talk about in my coaching, both team coaching and individual coaching, is imagine a Venn diagram with 3 overlapping circles. The first circle is your talent. The second one is experience. And the third one is, are people willing to pay for it? So,
Yeah.
you can have all the talent and the experience in the world, but if you're not able to match that up with what people are looking for, you're not a very good marketer. You've got to figure out where the need is. And frankly, if your skill set is getting rusty, if I'm really good at making TV commercials, but that's just not where it's at anymore, and it's more about how do you leverage LLMs to reinvent how the marketing process works. Yeah, it's time to go to school, and it's time to demonstrate that you've not only mastered that, but you can also make money for the company that you're working for.
Absolutely. And I like how you approach that Venn diagram. I almost had like this visualization as someone who's also in marketing. I relate to that very well, but I like how those three pillars are what kind of make up, you know, when someone's kind of navigating, I guess, their journey and in their career as well. Like I I found that very insightful, actually.
Good. Good. Well, the other piece of development plan is you should have, in fact, one of the things that Proctor did, I thought that was very helpful is at the end of every annual review, they would ask you two questions. Karina, where do you see yourself a year from now? And where do you see yourself in 5 years? And that was a calibration exercise because, um, I mean, it's fine for some folks if they say, I found my dream job. I want to do this the rest of my life and I want to contribute in any way that I can. I used to be a little bit looking down my nose at those folks, but hey, they're important and they play a role in the company and all that. But that's not the people that are listening to this podcast because I'm assuming they want to continue to go up the career ladder and they want to continue to have greater responsibilities and greater opportunities. So I think what you've got to do is have a bit of a North Star that says, my goal, for example, is to be a CMO in 5 years. And for the next 12 months, what I want to do is continue to demonstrate that I'm on that path to being able to step into that role. And frankly, from a selfish point of view, although you're not going to say this, and frankly, if you guys don't recognize that I'm ready for it and somebody else does, I'm out of here
Yeah.
because I'm not going to be forced to accept that, for whatever reason, you're not ready to promote me, but other people are. So I cannot overemphasize the importance of a development plan. You've got to constantly be thinking about what else do I need to add to my portfolio of experiences and talent and demonstrate to people that you are ready to walk into the next role. Because here's the other thing to watch out for. Once you get into that role like a CMO, if you haven't completed the portfolio of skills that you need, it is a really lousy time to do on-the-job training because
Yeah.
you're not going to have the time for that. You're going to have to, it, you know, an analogy might be if you're going to be a fighter pilot, you need to know every aspect of that, uh, you know, jet because when you're in the middle of a combat situation, you don't want to forget how to turn the missiles on. So the same thing is true for for a CMO. You want to make sure that you are fully functional and totally competent in deploying all the necessary skills and talents that you're going to need to be a successful CMO. And so now is the time to do the hard work and get the training in, the experience, and frankly, the confidence so that when you're in that role, you can lead.
Absolutely. And speaking about the confidence in the role, especially at that level, I know you've said that marketers need to speak the language of business, not just on the branding side. So, what are the first steps maybe a young marketer should take to get more fluent in finance, metrics, and just overall strategic thinking?
I would pass along a couple of things that I've done during my career that turned out to be, pretty valuable. Um, Recognize that the finance team um, is not going to have a particular knowledge or frankly even interest in what marketing does. So I think it's imperative that you go in there and educate them as to what the heck are you guys spending all this money on?
Yeah.
Because I think that a number of your listeners have been in a situation where, hey, we're having a tough quarter and we're going to cut the marketing budget by 20%, but we're not going to reduce any of the targets you've got here. And that is a fundamental misalignment between appreciating the value that marketing has in terms of contributing to the revenue of a company. I mean, it'd be like saying we're going to take 20% of the gas out of your tank, but we still want you to be able to drive the entire distance we talked about. You're not going to get
Yeah.
there. So
Exactly.
you've got to be constantly figuring out ways. How do we educate and motivate the finance team to appreciate what we're doing? At the same time, you've got to go to school and really understand how they think. What are the terms they use? What are the challenges they face? What are the things that drive them nuts in terms of what the marketing folks do? Like one thing that I've heard of lately that I can absolutely appreciate that would both drive the CFO and the head of IT crazy is to have the marketers go out and hire all these contracts with vendors that, first of all, they don't talk to each other. And second, it's not budgeted. I mean, that's a suicide mission there. So
Yeah.
you've got to have this ongoing alliance between those critical functions. And right now, I would say, the finance function, the IT function should be the best friends of the marketing person. And you should be meeting with them on a regular basis. You should volunteer, for example, to go speak to the finance team or speak to the IT team or invite them to come in and talk to you. You should maybe have some joint projects together where you meet on a regular basis and agree on the common metrics. You should, if there's some learning opportunities, if there's some things that you've learned about AI that you think would be particularly interesting to the IT folks, how can you incorporate them into a project to get that, rolling? So there's so many opportunities. But if you live in your little marketing silo and you don't talk to any of the other folks, and then it hits the fan, don't be surprised if they come in and they start taking away your budget and frankly, taking away a lot of the roles and responsibilities the marketing function's supposed to have. I've seen it happen way too many times.
Yeah, that's very true because, early on, like I'm still early on in my career. And, I remember back in school, I mentioned this on the podcast before because had a similar conversation in terms of being financial literacy and understanding that side of the business and across business functions instead of marketing. And when I was back in school, I was always like, wow, why am I always taking so many finance classes? Why am I taking so much accounting and like my degrees and stuff like that? And I didn't realize it until finally I was in my MBA program and I was like, it's starting to really click as to why all of these different functions are so important as a marketer, because you're able to understand their side, like you're saying, and understand, what's at stake from the marketing perspective. And when that mindset shift happened for me, I was like, it changed the game. And I think that's the best advice as a young marketer you could give someone, honestly.
Well, here's the thing you got to keep in mind. Marketing is a means to an end. Marketing is not an end into itself. And I think the mistake a lot of marketers make is they get so hung up on the art and the science of marketing. They kind of forget, oh yeah, at the end of the day, we're here to make money and we're here to make
Yes.
our shareholders are glad they invested in this company. So by showing that appreciation every time you talk to a finance person, the odds are they're going to be a lot more respectful of what you're trying to do versus if you go in there and all you talk about is the funnel and click rates and CAC and you don't connect it all the way to and therefore we made our profit goal or therefore we grew our revenue by blank percent or we
Yeah.
grew our market share. So yeah, it's a means to an end. You're part of a team. You're an important part of the team, but you're not an end goal of what the company is there for.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that one of your biggest pieces of advice that we talked about was to be easy to manage. So, in your experience, what qualities make someone, a high ROI team member, if you will, and how can leaders coach those traits into others?
Well, when I've had various teams, and Karina, I don't know about you, but when I first started out, I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to have a big team? That would be amazing. Well, there's a expression, more people equal more problems, and that is absolutely true.
Absolutely.
So ideally, you'd like to start with a smaller team so your odds of getting a real problem go down. But one thing I used to always tell my folks is if you love drama, go to the theater because I have zero tolerance for drama at work. And what does drama at work mean? Well, I think you know exactly what it means. People that are, it's always a crisis. It's always a, um, emotional outburst of some type. It's like
Yes.
riding an emotional roller coaster. And we don't have time for that. I mean, I will have a lot of sympathy and respect and support for somebody that's having some personal challenges. Maybe you've got
Of course.
a sick kid or maybe your spouse is unemployed or maybe you're just kind of going through a tough time. I've got a lot of support for that. But I think people, when they're on a team, need to realize that the team should be the primary focus of the organization. And if you've got whiners or gossipers or backstabbers or anything like that, I would give them one opportunity. I pull them aside and say, look, this is unacceptable and we're not going to, take this anymore. But if it continued, then we'd have to have a different conversation. And that person would have to go find their happy place somewhere else because another cliche, but one bad apple really does spoil the bunch. If you're trying to keep morale going, especially if you're in a tough business situation and you've got Debbie Downer on your team, you got to get rid of Debbie Downer
Oh,
because
yeah.
it is hard enough to stay stoic and optimistic in the face of a lot of what we're dealing with. So everybody's got to be team together, team apart, and let's do whatever it takes to get this team across the finish line and no whining.
Exactly. I actually like that. That's honestly been my mentality these days. And I think the probably the hardest part of the job is managing the people because of the emotions and keeping up the team morale. And at least for me, um, that I've seen so far, and that's a lot of that's probably one of the things that is probably not talked about a lot, especially towards next gen until they get into those leadership roles and then they end up realizing, oh, okay, this is what they were talking about is pretty tough. But um, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's all about the team having the right people behind you for sure, and everyone's just trying to meet the same goal, like
Yeah.
with the company.
And being a strong leader is really tricky because it's a balancing act.
It is.
You want to be vulnerable, you want to be sympathetic, you want to be supportive, but on the other hand, you certainly don't want to be a pushover, and people start to think, oh well,
Yeah.
if I just go to this person and say I'm not happy, I need a raise, or why didn't I get promoted last week, or you're making me work too hard. Um, People need to understand, especially in a startup environment, hey, look, you're going to have to wear a lot of hats. You're probably going to have to do a lot of things that you don't necessarily have the time to do, but you got to figure it out. And this job is not for everybody. So
Yeah.
if this is not a good fit, and here's one other bit of wisdom that I picked up. If your gut is saying this is not going to work out, do not let that person stick around for both your sakes, because
Yeah.
they'll be a lot happier going somewhere else and your team will be a lot happier. So, like I say, being a strong, effective leader is a balancing act between being supportive, but also being tough. And that sounds like a contradiction, but the people that do it well, win the loyalty of the people that are on that team. They can go off and do amazing things once they kind of get to that part of, uh, agreeing this is what it's all about and it's all eyes on the prize.
Absolutely. And I know another thing we talked about was one of your most memorable rules was don't embarrass yourself. So, in an era of constant visibility, how do you coach leaders to kind of protect their personal brand without losing that authenticity?
Well, a couple of things. I used to have a real strong rule at any company function that um, you were on display, and anything you did was subject to review. And you did not want to do any. You didn't want to be the Monday morning story after the Friday
Yep.
company event. Um, so that would go from anything from just stupid behavior to getting drunk or um, doing things that people are going to kind of raise their eyebrows and kind of wonder. So you want to be that role model. That doesn't mean you have to be boring or a stick in the mud or anything like that. But I've seen people totally derail their careers at one Chris, at a Christmas party, and that's just
Yeah.
that reputations take a lifetime to build and an instant to destroy. The other thing that is especially important is that we are all going to be leaving companies at some point in our career. And the question is, are you going to leave in a way in which people are going to be impressed? Or are you going to burn the house down on the way out? I've seen too many people kind of use that last week at work as almost like it's time to even the score, and I'm going to write some memos or say some things
Yeah.
or all that. And I've always taken great pride in the fact that I want to be able to, from a selfish point of view, use those people for references, and also, frankly, have people, have a good, you know, miss me when I'm gone. So again, as you're leaving an organization, what can you do to leave a really powerful, positive impression? Like one of the most valuable investments anybody can make, I think, is get yourself some really good stationery. the thick stuff, the embossed letterhead and all that other good stuff. And write, 4x6 thank you notes and leave those to the people that you've worked with. In an age in which people are not recognized for being a great leader, if you get people receiving those notes, and I've done this my entire career, it makes a huge difference in their, reputation and of your reputation and how they feel about working with you. And it doesn't take a huge investment, a little bit of time, a little bit of money, but check it out. Go get some really good expensive stationery, Karina. I think it'll be worth your investment.
I think that is excellent advice. I don't think I've ever seen someone do that, at least in my career so far. So that is,
You've never gotten a handwritten thank you note from any of your bosses. Well,
no.
that is tragic. If we'd worked together, I would have sent you one. But yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You take a little bit of time, and it's got to be from the heart.
And I
Uh,
like that. You go the extra mile.
yeah. But in this age of, and a lot of people go, well, I'll just send them an email, and it's like, no. That they get millions of emails. They don't get very many handwritten thank yous. So
Yeah.
take time.
Yeah. Which, I've never received any, but I have done that myself for my
Yeah,
clients, right? I love a handwritten note. I know that's something that was always taught to me earlier on as well, and by some of my mentors and the leaders that I've had. And it does go a long way. It's just like people don't really receive that anymore. So when you get it, you're like, wow, like they actually took the time, wrote it from the heart.
right.
It's memorable. It really is.
And I forget who said it, but there's the quote about, people will not remember what you said, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah, that's
And
very
that is,
true.
I think one of the keys to being a strong leader is to have the kind of reputation that you care. Because the worst bosses I've had, and this is something we haven't talked about, but most of the management principles that I've learned over time have been doing the exact opposite of the worst bosses I've had. Like, for example, one of the worst things that anybody can do who's a boss is to single out somebody in public and shame them. That to me is like unforgivable. Like the
It is.
Brits have a great expression, praise in public, coach in private. So one of the things that I think that, aspiring folks should do is pay attention to what the great leaders do, but maybe even pay more attention to what the lousy leaders do and try to analyze, what is it about that particular behavior that I hate so much? And I'm going to remember that when I'm in a similar role. And in addition to all the things that you want to do, you've got to have a couple of things that you swear you'll never do.
Yeah, that's very true. Now, I know we talked a little bit about AI, so I want to transition there for a bit. So you say if you don't master Gen AI, you'll work for someone else who does. So what does mastery actually look like today for marketers, and how can someone get ahead while others are still kind of dabbing into this space?
Well, I remember when I was at eBay, it was 2002. And remember, this is a guy that had spent his formative marketing career. Well, I can remember we didn't even have computers when I started, for God's sake. I mean, I remember, we got like the first word processor, for our team. So we were like there in the dark ages. And so walking into this, high tech company, eBay, with all this stuff going on, I finally looked around and asked anybody, is there a book or is there a course or anything? I mean, what do we do? And some guy told me, we're making this up as we go along. It's like we're building a plane where we're flying it, and one of the engines is on fire.
Yeah.
And I don't think that today is any different than that. I think nobody knows how this movie is going to end. I think that the only way that we're going to figure this out is by getting your hands dirty. So that's the thing I love about, developing these apps, for example, with Replit. You hit a wall, you go, well, that didn't work. Let's try this. And you hit another wall, and you say, well, let's try that. Again, and the discipline of P&G in terms of testing, like, we've got a control group, we've got a test group. Let's go prove this stuff. Marketing is both an art and a science, but man, if there was ever an opportunity to get the science part of it right, this is it. I mean, you've got
Yeah.
so many ways that you could set up experiments and prove stuff. And oh, by the way, your friends in finance will love you for it because they love math.
Oh,
The
yeah.
squishy stuff they're not so crazy about. But if you can show them quantitatively, hey, this is what we tried, this is why it worked, this is why it's worth making a big bet, then, not only will the business benefit, but your reputation as a very effective business leader will go up. So get your hands dirty. And if you think you're going to delegate this, you're kidding yourself, because how in the hell are you supposed to supervise people that are doing it if you don't have any idea what they're doing? So all my entire career, I don't necessarily, the analogy I use is an orchestra leader. You don't need to know how to play every instrument in the orchestra, but you need to be familiar enough with each of those instruments that you know what good looks like. Because frankly, if you don't do that, the people that you're trying to coach are not going to have any respect for you.
Yeah, it's very
So
true.
get your hands dirty, go to school. There's so many different ways that you can learn, what is going on here. There is a platform, sectionai.com. I've taken a number of their courses. And the cool thing about it is you can also get certified on each of those courses. So your LinkedIn profile can show your merit badges after you've done it.
Absolutely.
And I've also mentioned Replit. That's a fun one that I would encourage people. But now, if you're not excited about this kind of stuff, you might want to do a career assessment and decide, is this really the kind of thing you want to do? Because if you think this is a big deal now, it's going to become an overwhelming part of the job within the next probably 3 to 5 years, probably faster than any of us think. And those that are good at it are really going to just be masters of the universe. And those that aren't, it's not going to be a fair fight. I mean, you're not going to have a chance. So get in there. If you love this stuff, get in there and get your hands dirty and learn and have fun and grow and share your experiences with others. And if you're not quite sure, then maybe you ought to go do something else, because it is not for the faint of heart, and it's not for the people that are not excited about it from day one.
Absolutely. I think that's the only way you're going to ever be able to really continuously grow, even in your career, is being receptive to the new technology that's coming in and being open minded to learning those new things,
Yeah.
because you don't want to be left behind. I mean, especially in
Yeah.
this industry.
All that said, I think there is a lot of merit to pausing before you jump right into a project, because I think I read an MIT study that says something like 90% of a lot of AI projects they didn't hit the ROI they were supposed to. You're going to have so many ways in which you can apply AI in your company. So one bit of advice for the marketers out there is, get a team together, evaluate a half a dozen different things that you can do with AI, and then decide what are the criteria by which we want to evaluate the results of whatever we're going to be doing. What is the appropriate budget to spend on this? What's the appropriate timeline? And then after you've done the analysis, you pick your top and maybe your second top project. Then you go to your management and present that. That is going to be a lot more likely to succeed than just grabbing the first thing that comes down the chute and saying, okay, we're going with this. Because especially in these early days, there are going to be a lot of naysayers. And all they're going to need are a couple of examples of going, oh yeah, we tried that. That didn't work. This is stupid. So, be thoughtful, be strategic, be deliberate. And this is a wonderful opportunity for, I think, a marketer to take the lead in organizing a multidisciplined effort such as that in your company.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Now, as we circle to our last question here and wrap up the podcast, I know you've navigated high stake roles across global brands, startups, now leadership coaching. We've talked all about this throughout the podcast. But what's one hard earned lesson that only became clear with experience? And how would you translate that advice into the next generation for the marketing leaders?
Well, I mentioned Bill before. I worked for the same guy for about 16 years in different companies. That's pretty amazing. I was very lucky because, to have a boss like that, we were mutually supportive of each other is pretty rare, and I'm grateful for it. But he had a mantra, and he would repeat this mantra on a regular basis, and that is disagree and commit. So what does disagree and commit mean? Disagree and commit means that you're not working in a democratic organization when you're in a company. You're working for, frankly, a benevolent dictatorship. It's more like the military. You can't have people debating okay, well, let's take a vote as to whether or not, we want to go do that or not. No, that's not the way it works. So what a strong leader like Bill would do is say, I want everybody to give me their best arguments as to what we should be doing. And specifically around an exact proposal as to what we ought to be doing. But once we make that decision, when we walk out of this room, by God, we are locked and loaded. And you know what? It might not go the way that the majority of you guys want to go, because as the leader, I've got to make the tough call that we're going to go left and not right. But by God, if I walk out of here and I hear any Monday morning quarterbacking or any dissent as to, well, I'm just not quite sure that, then that was not good. So just like a good military operation, you've got to have a united front. You've got to be very focused, and you can't second guess what your management has decided. And as long as I felt like he would listen to what I would tell him, even if we went a different direction, I was fine with that. I think that's one of the reasons we got along so well. So that would be the mantra I would suggest that a lot of people might want to think about adapting as a leader: disagree and commit, because I've seen too many companies where they didn't do that and it didn't work out very well.
Yeah, and honestly, that is excellent advice. I think that that's a perfect way to honestly end off this episode. And I couldn't thank you enough for joining us on today and sharing all of your wisdom and your incredible, incredible journey. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Karina. It was fun. Appreciate it.